Alright, everybody, today we are going to dive into and take a look at how we can sort of combat mental fatigue and its impact on our strength training. This came from Chris Beardsley and his strength and conditioning research review, and I highly suggest you check him out on Twitter. That is at SNC Research on Twitter. So this idea came from him, and it was a great study. He also puts out great visuals on the studies that he reviews, so absolutely check him out. Let's get to it, though. So first, let's start by defining what is mental fatigue. Mental fatigue occurs when your brain is too tired from prolonged cognitive effort. So this sort of happens when you're focusing on a demanding task or staying focused on something complex. This type of fatigue can impact physical performance in that it drains cognitive resources that helps us push through physical challenges. So what are some things that could be considered sort of cognitively taxing? So in the study that Chris reviewed, the study was called Mental Fatigue Reduces Training Volume in Resistance Exercise. This is from Quiros, Dantas, and Fortes, and that was in Perceptual and Motor Skills in 2021. In their study, to impose mental fatigue, they had participants do the Stroop task. So what's the Stroop task? So the Stroop task is a well-known cognitive task, and it has you doing a couple of things. So participants are going to be exposed to words and colors, and the words are going to actually be the names of particular colors. Now, the funny thing here is that written out is the word red. However, it might be colored green. Similar to that, you might have the word yellow, but that may be colored blue. Now, in the Stroop task, participants are asked to read the color, not the word, or vice versa, and they're asked to do this for multiple words. Now, doing this is going to create some kind of a cognitive load, cognitive burden, mental fatigue if you do it for long enough. Now, saying the color instead of the word might sound simple, but I highly recommend you go and check out the Stroop task for yourself because it can become difficult if you want to do this task in a timely manner or as quickly and efficiently as possible because you are going to mix and jumble because the visual color you see isn't going to be congruent with the word that you're reading. So it's going to be cognitively demanding either way you go, whether naming the color, the visual color you see, or the word. Now, this mental effort creates cognitive fatigue by demanding sustained focus and conflict resolution. So the conflict between the visual color and the word that is written, which does make this an effective way to induce sort of mental fatigue. Now, in this study, they took strength-trained men and made them perform squats to failure at a moderate intensity. And what they found was the athletes in the experimental group who did the Stroop task before performing these squats to failure, they performed less overall reps in their later sets. So the first sets of the back squat to failure weren't really any different between the control and the experimental group. However, once you got into set 2 and set 3, the experimental group who did the Stroop task did fewer reps in the second and third sets of the exercises. Also, the athletes were rated on their motivation to train, which was similar across groups, whether control or experimental, so it wasn't a lack of willpower or anything like that. It was, for the most part, simply mental fatigue causing some of the reps to fall off. Now, even though the athletes' physical strength wasn't directly impacted, they perceived the effort as higher when mentally fatigued. This perceived increase in effort led them to stop sooner, reducing the volume they could achieve, and possibly impacting growth over time. Let's move on to some tips. I realize this was a single study, and I'd be interested in doing some follow-ups to this. However, let's see what we could do, or my first thoughts on how can we keep mental fatigue low so that it doesn't continuously impact strength or hypertrophy training. So tip number 1, work out first thing in the morning. Oh, surprise, surprise. So as we move along about our day, our mental fatigue and cognitive load goes up and up and up and up and up. The thing you'll notice about the Stroop task is the conflict resolution where you had to decide, your brain had to decide between saying the color that it saw versus the letters that were written. And we don't necessarily do that throughout the day, but we're constantly making decisions throughout our entire day. Do I wear this? Do I wear that? Do I eat this? Do I eat that? And then depending on the complexity of our work, we might be making hundreds and thousands of little decisions all before we get to a workout in the evening. However, if we sort of front load our days with our workouts, we may be able to eke out better performance by way of not having a high cognitive burden. So if you can and you want to optimize for keeping mental fatigue really, really low, I think working out earlier in the day is going to net you a bit of benefits there. Now, all this to say, if it doesn't fit in your schedule or if you feel completely weak and drained and can't work out first thing in the morning, probably not the best bet. But if you generally seem like you are fine in the mornings, afternoons, or even the evenings, maybe if it fits into your schedule, shift to the morning and do that for a little while if you want to sort of optimize for mental fatigue. Now, tip number 2, this is sort of a hypothesis of mine, but I would argue if you practiced mindfulness and were able to be more mindful, you could probably mitigate some of the effects that mental fatigue has on your training. Now, there are several episodes on mindfulness on this channel, so please go and check those out. But my hypothesis here, that is going to help improve concentration, reduce distractibility after a very sort of taxing day. I think one of the downstream effects of having a mentally fatiguing day is the increase in distractibility and concentration difficulties. So if we practice mindfulness, we can sort of mitigate some of those downstream things and perhaps perform better in our workouts if we have to work out in the late afternoons or even the evening. So tip number 2, practicing mindfulness to reduce your mental burden. Tip number 3, if you know you have a mentally demanding day ahead of you, maybe schedule a rest day. If you know you have a mentally demanding day ahead of you, maybe schedule some of your lighter work on that day and save some of your higher intensity work for another day when you aren't so mentally taxed. So this approach kind of avoids the situation altogether. However, I think that's sort of what we have to work with whenever we're trying to optimize what it is that we're doing. Again, so this is sort of a tertiary or periphery thing that we could focus on in terms of training. At the end of the day, get your volume in, eat well, sleep well, and all will probably be well. However, if you're interested in optimizing, maybe take a look if you have a mentally taxing job. Again, we're all just trying to eke out as many gains as possible. And once you have checked all the other boxes, and this is what we're left with, trying to reduce our mental fatigue can possibly eke out some extra gains. So the next time you're designing your next mesocycle, give this a shot. Think about scheduling a lot of your workouts in the mornings. If you can't schedule your workouts in the morning, try and schedule your lighter days or rest days on mentally demanding days. And then also consider practicing some mindfulness to help mitigate some of the downstream effects of high mental fatigue. Anyways, I hope this helped. Go on to X, check Chris Beardsley out at Strength and Conditioning Review, and I hope I'll see you all in the next episode for another mental skill or possibly a review. Who knows? I'll see you there.